Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Right along here with Ransom Godwin tonight, taking you through 2 hours of our world, how it's changing, and how you might find your way to thrive during these interesting times. I'm coming at you from Budapest, Hungary tonight, 4 in the morning start time here. But Ransom, I wanted to tell you right away, when we were talking to one of the taxi drivers, he was saying that the number one influx, because we were talking tourist season's coming up here pretty soon, next month gets kind of ramped up. And I was asking him, which country is kind of the most visitors this time? And he said Germans. And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't really. It's like, no, they're moving here in droves to escape Germany. And we were both kind of laughing, going, wait a second, you mean they're moving over here to what was former Soviet Union that was behind the Iron Curtain? It's like completely flipped. The same thing, we're looking at escalating food prices, and here in Hungary, everything has risen at least 40% in the last year for food. So you go out to a restaurant and the menus are old menus, and it's like, hey, everything's rising so fast we can't adjust the prices. So it's hitting home here to roost. So tonight, we're talking about food being an investment. I mean, how are your seed stocks? Did anybody get ready for buying a bunch of seeds this year to plant out in the garden? Ransom and I always talk about victory gardens and growing your own food to get more self-sufficient, less reliant on the system. But it seems ever more urgent than ever right now. And also, as we start this broadcast, the news coming out of, looks like Israel has now attacked Iran as we speak. It seems, I'll give you a quick update here for those just listening. Moments ago, 3 huge explosions near central Iran city of Natanz and Isfahan. Now, these are the locations of the Iranian Nuclear Technology Center and the center of Iran's nuclear weapons programs. Also, simultaneous explosions in Iraq and Syria. And it seems that the Israeli Air Force there is now targeting pro-Iranian militias. But on the flip side, Russian fighters are in the air to intercept American fighters in the event that they do decide to, I don't know what the protocol would be, intercept something else. But it does seem like that calm before the storm has suddenly become not so calm. Now, gold's rising instantly above 2,400 on other trading across the planet while the U.S. markets sleep. You're going to wake up to $40 to $50 higher per ounce gold prices tomorrow, nearing 2,500 US dollars. So as we see, gold is truly the safe haven. Crypto, not so much. Although I will say, during that time of this last first Iranian strike into Israel, there was a Mars-Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, Mars-Saturn conjunction, which was already forecast, irregardless of what happened, for markets to lock up in liquidity just based on sidereal astrology. And the markets are already forecast to collapse until right around today, the 20th, and now they shall rebound. And here we go. Markets are up, well, for a while at least. But anyway, Ransom, that little brief moment of calm seems to have just gotten thrown back into the frying pan. Heat turned on high and a little bit of gasoline added to it. So anyway, welcome. Food is an investment. Ransom, you're on mute, my man. Okay, well, we'll wait till he comes back and gets off mute. Anyway, I'll kick through a couple stories here.
Yeah.
Man. It's a pesky little button, isn't it?
Kind of take it with a grain of salt sometimes. Am I?
Go, man. The floor is yours.
You. No, I think that was a super delay, man.
Yeah, so how is it the delay over here? You know, we're 12 hours or 6 hours apart, and actually 9. So what is the delay on the microphone on my end compared to
Super delay.
yours?
So I'm barely just hearing myself seconds later.
Okay. What do you want to do, man? You want to sign off for a second? We'll try to get you back in.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. 5 by 5.
You know what? It's silly. I was listening to the broadcast and not you live. That's what it was. So I answered your question way late. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was on the wrong headset listening to you. I like sometimes I listen to your shows and I kind of zoned out there for a minute, I guess. I forgot to change headsets. Yeah, no, it's crazy. You could tell you know, what we've been saying, our audience has been paying attention that things are going to come to a head. Like you said, really, regardless of what everybody else is doing in the world or what you're doing, it's still going to impact you here at home. And people, you know, I saw a big thing that went viral the other day that somebody was charging $7 for one apple in New York City. Just one nice, you know, juicy apple, $7. So we kind of talked about that before. The people that are in the cities are about to have a rude awakening when the cost of, you know, transportation goes up and more straits around the world close and shipping lanes and treaties, deals from different countries as they pick sides to the other side. It's going to, for the first time, I think, really show the negative side of when globalization meets localization. And they talked a lot about that when I went to college 20 years ago, you know, saying it as a good thing, the whole just-in-time system that's based on this when globalization meets localization. And basically what that means is that some market somewhere else in the world has been working effort to make sure that there's a product waiting for you when you want to get it. And no matter what you think, you know, is going on behind the products and the prices, there's a whole big story, and it's bigger than people think. So say you're buying dates, let's just use that for an example, and maybe one of the main Middle Eastern countries that exports that has some difficulties politically or militarily all of a sudden. Well, then those dates not only are not getting planted and you know, pulled down, or I don't know exactly how, you know, the process behind dates, but anyway, there's going to be a problem with those. And then all of a sudden your little cheap treats at the health food store, you know, cost $10 for a little ounce of it or something like that. And the same goes for every single product that's intertwined with foreign, you know, economies. Let's talk about, you know, let's say noodles. What happens if Italy gets involved with the Ukrainian conflict and this spreads through Europe? You know, miscellaneous things that you take for granted all of a sudden are not going to be on your shelves. So the question is food now an investment? We've talked about that lots of times. There may come a time where the food that you canned and jarred is the only food available. That means that if you've been doing like I've been doing, I haven't actually started farming this year because I've had so much maintenance doing with the property. I've been working on other stuff, fixing everything that's broken. But I have all the seeds necessary to create millions more seeds. And people that just aren't on this type of thinking are going to lose out in the near future, simply because, you know, times are changing, and unfortunately they're changing in a negative way. And you keep seeing these conflicts folding out, just like we've predicted. They're going to expand into regional conflicts, bigger than one might think, especially the one in the Middle East. And keep in mind that, you know, it is a lot of miles, hundreds of miles to the other combat zone. But when you look at a map of Europe and the Middle East, you realize that these combat situations are not far from each other. So it's only a matter of time until all of the nations are entangled in one way or another. And then, I mean, what do you call that? You don't call that a regional war anymore. That is a world war. What does that mean for the grocery store? Well, necessarily, like I said, those products from those other countries are going to either stop showing up because that country is now trying to sell them in their own country, or they've made a new treaty or a new deal with one, maybe the other side of the trade war that's going on right now, and the monetization war of currencies, I guess you would say. And that's all this looks like to me, really, is two of the major central banks playing off each other, just like they did in World War II, till we get to a point where they have what they want, which is a new map, new zones, a whole new thing. And I really am starting to think, maybe it's just me jumping the gun, but I'm sure you've been seeing the stories of all of the greening in the Middle East, and all of these storms, and people criticizing like DuByne and different places for maybe cloud seeding too much. They worry that people playing with the weather caused all of the devastation the other day. But the truth is, it may be on that time of the cycle where that portion of the world is a new breadbasket, where it starts to rain there more often. And they have, new technologies getting them access to the aquifers that are there, which necessarily means that the billionaire tycoons, nation states, and other people are going to be trying to control and invest those areas. And I believe another one of those areas that's going to be a super grow zone is Central and South North America and North South America, if that makes sense, all through Central America there. And weirdly, all of these places we're talking about that are starting to kind of go in a better way weather-wise are also the same nations that are, in a sense, exporting the populations of people that would be reproducing in their country. So they're getting rid of the populace while they're setting up these new zones with new controllers that the public would recognize as new factions, but really they'll be the same factions. And in my opinion, this whole thing is really akin to the, it's a debated letter from Pike, right, to the whatever the other Mason's guy name was, but in there, whether that's fictional or real, it does kind of outline a plan that seems to be unfolding. And that plan would be that the Abrahamic religions around the world are at each other's throat. And that would be the major motivating factor of, believe it or not, a third world war that's more technologically advanced than any war that's ever been fought by these groups in the past, which will leave the world devastated for decades and decades if it continues. And just think about the 7 countries kind of in a row that we have already meddled in, and those countries before and after we sort of brought them freedom, if you know what I'm saying. So we freed the hell out of them over there, and now we're going to do it again, or this time we'll just use some proxy so it doesn't have our red, white, and blue flag on it. But we all know if either one of these expand, we're obligated by treaties that people in positions of power might have signed and made deals with against its citizenry and voters. And the same thing's going on now. We're dumping hundreds of billions of dollars into these conflicts. So we might as well have boots on the ground. We're paying for the boots that are on the ground to have equipment, to have backing, to have naval and air support. So this is going to spread. And, it was obvious when the drones and some of the missiles landed coming from Iran that we would see a week of retaliation and what amounts to revenge. So this map that I'm showing on there comes from ABC News, and it's kind of showing the distance or radius that the two types of missiles that might be fired, a Jericho 2 and a Jericho 3, and how far they can get. And as you can see, these missiles can fire all the way over into Russia if they wanted to, all the way on the other side of Iran. So these are new waves of new technology getting played with that's actually old for us, but it's new for the countries that are about to start using it. So we're about to see a repeat of the Iraq war, just in new cities, and it'll be in Iran, it'll be in Iraq, it'll be in Syria, and I would bet that it spreads into Turkey and that the war above them in Ukraine, which is about lost on the Ukrainian side, will have fighters retaliating from within Turkey against Russia or one of the other Islamic breakaway countries that are along Russia's old border of the, all of them breakaway, like Kazakhstan. And I forgot the names of the rest of them right offhand, but there's several there. And then let's talk about the breakaways in Eastern Europe. Some of these alliances and deals and old hatreds or blood feuds are still going decades and decades after. You might have thought they would have been put to rest after the wall fell. It's obvious that the Cold War never stopped. And indeed, the Cold War was the beginning of World War III, and you could have named it that. And if you just squeeze all of the conflicts we've kind of had since the end of World War II into what's going on right now, you'll see that the world has never stopped being at war. The World War has never really ended. They've just morphed it into different things. And now it's starting to come home to roost. Our economy is obviously in a bubble that's about to pop. We can't afford to be giving billions of dollars away. None of that money is being used for the citizenry here as homelessness increases, crime increases, food prices increase. And I put to you that soon we'll have lack of food choices. Right now we can already see the different distribution lanes of shipping being closed down worldwide. So all we need is one more major tick going on in the Pacific Ocean between China, the Chinese forces, and any other group or territorial dispute. And most of the world will then be in some kind of turmoil. And that includes the Americas. And it's heating up in Mexico. The cartels are now kind of going at each other. Some of them want to make money off of the Chinese trade of fentanyl. Others don't want to do it because they have their own money invested in other programs. U.S. intelligence is tied up with all of these scenarios worldwide. So we're in it to win it, DuByne. We're in it to win it. And I think that people's bellies are going to start feeling it. And, when you go back to like the years 2000 and think about these things that we read, like the stuff that was coming out of the Project for a New American Century think tank. And then, you got Agenda 2020 and Agenda 2030 and these different mentions of timelines. They all really start about 2024, 2025, and they expect them to be completely deployed and functional by 2030, which is only 6 or less than that short years away, 5.5 years away. We are going to be in full-blown New World Order territory, and we're starting to see their dream, their plan, their infrastructure being created right now. But in order to do that, they have to rearrange the map, and we have to install new players in new places. There are still many players around the world that don't like to do business with the central banks as much as they could get away with. And we all know what happens when you stop working directly for the central bank. I mean, just ask Saddam Hussein, ask Gaddafi. I'm sure there's plenty of other people in history we could ask about that. That seems to be a major factor when it comes to warfare, is whether or not the bank is okay with what said country is doing with its resources. And I would say that food and water are about to become equally valuable and tradable as gold.
Take you back in the history book. Austro-Hungarian Empire, man, split them up, dice them up, put new management systems on the farm. Can't have that large nation with that much wealth and natural resources under a single control. They needed to dice it up into 12 different nations and put each nation under control and the thumb screws for the central banking. Russian Empire, go back, you can take a look back at this map as early as even 1900, and that's really not far back. I mean, you need to look at the Austro-Hungarian Empire map of 1900 and see what it encompassed. You had the German Empire at that time, the Russian Empire, and then this massive behemoth square in the middle that is now what we consider like Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia, all the way down through all the Baltic states, except for Serbia and not Montenegro, but everything else all the way down coastal Adriatic Sea. I mean, include Romania. It was such a vast Austria, empire here, and had to be cut apart. It was. And, the thing about it is you hit the nail on the head there, Ransom. It's just continuous war. Because I'm running through a bunch of museums looking for clues to history, and I found I'm staying in this Airbnb here, and she has a library, the owner of the house. And I'm looking back through all these books going back into the 1700s. And it's just nothing but constant war. Every single image, I'm so tired of looking at dudes on horses slaughtering other people with swords. I'm tired of looking at this. I'm trying to find clues in history. And yeah, there's a lot of mud flood stuff over here and some amazing architecture. Looking through the paintings, it's continuous carnage. It's never been not this carnage state of control of this planet. And it doesn't have to be this way. And, marching forward into Agenda 2030, I remember it as Agenda 21. But here we sit, and it's back at it again. Back at a 2.0 of carnage continuously. I mean, how long can this last? I'm looking at continuously 300 years at the minimum, nonstop. Death and destruction across vast swaths of our planet. And this is just from our known, what you consider Western history on this part of the world, what we've seen go through the Caucasus. And, I was looking at a few places thinking about, all right, well, where would the greatest food growing areas be? Where would these areas that would survive this grand solar minimum, where would they be? And I'd done a bunch of research, back before COVID, and I was thinking, all right, Republic of Georgia would be one of the best. They have 8,000 years of continuous wine growing, which means that the climate was stable. But it's also between Russia, which invaded it once already. It's in between like Azerbaijan, Armenia, that whole flash area there. And to the south, then they have Iran. So that's some very, very, very valuable real estate to control. Not only food control there, but the bridge between nations for invasions. And then I'm here at the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And in today's world, we know it as Hungary. But again, it's a crossroad nation. Food growing, it's stable. It doesn't get very crazy climate here because it's surrounded by mountains on all these different sides. Because the weather just doesn't come directly from the Arctic. If it does, they get massive storms. But otherwise, they're protected every direction. That's why it's been such a choice spot to control. And it's a crossroad to everywhere else. So when you look, you go, all right, well, they have all the food growing area they could need. The climates, depending on where you are, there are all these microclimates peppered through these areas, all these different wine growing regions with all these different agricultural regions on top of microclimates. And would it be a great place for food? Yes. But militarily, 100% guaranteed somebody's coming to occupy this place again. Republic of Georgia, incredible for food growing. Further south, very temperate. Winter's not very brutal there. From 1 to 10, food is a 10, but 100% guaranteed somebody's coming in to occupy that place again, and probably the next 10 years or under. If we're going into this global conflict again, these same areas on the planet that have been the have-to-have spots for military domination are going to be overrun again. Whether it was the Germans coming in to take this place during World War II or the Soviets coming in to control this place so the Germans couldn't march forward through this pivotal, this is a star point here, man. You go off of anywhere outside of Budapest and boom, all roads, it should be all roads lead to Budapest. That saying, all roads lead to Rome. Well, this is the same here. All roads lead to Budapest. And then all roads lead to, in the center of Georgia as well. Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, these others that have been on the Silk Road but are dominated points too. If you can control Kazakhstan, not only will you get the food growing area with the extra 10 million tons of grain, but you're also going to get the military transport spots where things can go north, south, east, and west on a moment's notice. And so you got to look at these hot spots also in addition to your safe zones. because it's kind of disheartening to look at that, and I say, we have a chance to push this darkness back. They started with Agenda 21 and it slowly slipped into Agenda 2030. But it's not written in stone. It's truly not carved in stone. It's more carved in paper mache at the moment. It's malleable. It's breakable. It's just the will of the global populace needs to push in one direction. Where does that direction go is the question. Because look at the Caucasus, for example. You got all those oil-rich areas. And then you got that crossroads again, Turkey and Georgia right there. Once you can mount from Turkey and Georgia, you can mount north, south, east, or west. And control the Caspian Sea, you control the oil. I know it's sour crude, but still. I mean, Hitler was right there, boom, right on, duck on a June bug, getting into the Caspian Sea because he needed the oil. Control those fields, and you got never ending. That his whole thing was like, you got to hit Baku first. And that was the biggest thing with the Germans during that time was they were slashing into Baku knowing if they could control those oil reserves that they would have a non-stop, fuel depot for their war machine. And that's what kind of flicked and sent, Japan off as well, was when America cut off their oil. They went down to Indonesia to get it. And then America's like, wait, you guys found a second oil source? Sheesh, what are we going to do about that? And they kept pushing them and smacking them and tatting them and, hitting them with an electric zapper until they finally went after Pearl Harbor. We cut off their second oil supply before any kind of aggression. It was just like, you guys are getting too big. You're going to compete with America. You can't do that. That was back in the 30s. Now, how do you think it is today? They actually were cutting off Japan's oil supply through Indonesia, a competitor. So now we're looking at, all right, well, the new farming techniques are going to be put across the planet. And I really want you to take a look at our world, how it is today. Do not think of nations as independent sovereign entities. You need to look at them as different farms and the different farming techniques utilized to control the cattle in that farm. It switches. It has to. Because the way the Germans are coming now to Hungary to get away from the despotic, censored Third Reich, Fourth Reich over in Germany evolving, prices are running away to some of their energy prices. He was telling me, the taxi driver was talking, he's talking to Germans continuously, Germans moving in. 10 times prices on some of their energy. They can't afford the food. The censorship's there. You're being dragged away in the middle of the night for sending posts or talking on social media. You join a political party and they raid your house because you're of the wrong political party. I mean, we're looking at the same exact things that happened during World War II just happening again right now. And the Germans are trying to escape that. But now over here in what you consider the quote unquote Eastern European, behind the Soviet lines, seems to become in these areas that are becoming freer as the rest of the world starts to lock up. So it's been this flip on the 80-year cycle, the Strauss and Howe 80-year, forward turning. Over here, on the other side of the Iron Curtain, formerly, is becoming the place to be where you want to be. Economies are starting to thrive. More and more freedoms as we know them that are being taken away and removed in the freest countries on the planet in the West. It's inverting itself at the moment. As hard as that is for everybody to stomach and swallow, it's what is happening. You look over some of these places in Asia that were, off limits to visit, or it was too hard-handed to live there. Well, those places are becoming more soft-gloved. If you're looking at places like Singapore and Malaysia, the rule of law is softening to what was that hardline approach is becoming, well, we can agree in a middle ground somewhere. Before it was this way or the highway, period. Not as bad as China. But still, if you'd ever been to Singapore, you dropped a piece of gum on the street and you either get lashes or you get jail time for chewing gum. And that's not the way it is now. Everything is bended and shifted. Indonesia, man, it's one of the fastest growing economies on the planet. And you start to look at this, the shift of money going away from the Western powers. And if you get out into South America, look at Suriname. These areas, Guyana, I think, had one of the fastest growing economies on the planet as well. African nations starting to run away from anything in the West, blowing by 80% growth. Where's this money getting siphoned out of the Western countries, pushing into these developing nations to start that next debt cycle over again? I'm telling you, we're all being played out here. We're absolutely being played. The propaganda machine running heavy like a German tank over your foot during World War II is hitting us and pushing the Western nations down. It's just nonstop propaganda. It's a different type of propaganda out here, but it's our time. Our economies are growing. The West is withering like a dead grape on the vine. Let's just break away from it. Our world is going to shift. We need to start trading with these partners. We need to start getting gold for the citizens, and they're still encouraging gold buying everywhere outside of the Western nations. They're actually, and I'll tell you one thing that's also shifted even since the last time we talked, Ransom, which was about 2 weeks ago. China is now shifting to tell people to buy silver. Now, originally, anybody who's been listening to the program, I've been talking about at least about 3-4 months now, that everywhere in Asia, they were encouraging their citizens to buy gold from 1 gram, which was, they called like a gold bean. Like it literally looked like a bean, the size of like any pinto bean or something of gold. And they had little cute glass piggy banks, it was very small, where you could put your little gold bead inside your gold bean. That's shifted. Now they're telling everybody, don't buy any more gold. The central bank needs to buy it, so you all have enough. You need to move over to buy silver, because they are going to absolutely rip to shreds the COMEX silver market. This is an economic war going on using precious metals at the same time. So everything I'm seeing out here is just, we in the West, and I talk about United States, Canada, which is turning communist, I don't know, it's a mix of socialism, Marxism, something to do with, corporations, fascist corporations mixing in addition to this new digital dystopia. There's got to be new adjectives to describe this, because the ones we used to use to describe this type of world and this type of absolute despot control no longer fit. We need new descriptors, because we're moving into more of a digital control world in addition to the police state world. We have to update our dictionaries with the control mechanisms as well. But these countries, we are absolutely going to get shredded. So prepare yourself for that. All of Asia is now telling their citizens to buy silver. And there's not enough silver to go around for that, even in the next couple of months. And if they do succeed in even having everybody buy a 10-ounce bar, 5 1-ounce rounds, that will literally drain the 200 million ounces of silver that's laying around down to zero. And that is all the physical that's laying around that's apparently the COMEX controls. So when you look at the open interest and how many fake paper contracts are out there versus how much literal real silver is, I think the global total right now, including London Bullion Metals Exchange, the COMEX, etc., sits around 350 to 400 million ounces. Correct me if I'm wrong. You'd have to look at the open orders out there and actually the physicals that's in the vaults. I'll be generous and say 500 million ounces. Even if everybody in China were to buy 1 ounce, that still is 3 times too little to supply the Chinese needs. Now they're trying to pull entire tons at a time over there. So I'll tell you, Ransom, we are in, at least in the West, these Western Five Eyes nations, we are about to be sacrificed on the pillar of economics and reset here to move that wealth over to start a new debt system and bring the third world into our creature comforts and the leisure economy as it unfolds. And seeing it out here in real time, man, it really kind of hurts my heart to see it. But I'm looking at backup plans now, because I don't know. This is for sure outside the U.S. is a place to be. Have a second backup plan somewhere. Hell, it could be Mexico. They're going to be joining the BRICS also. So that big old wall there might be to keep us from going back out to Mexico and further points south, because these nations that are going to trade without us are going to have absolute domination over the world economic stage, and we'll just be left with scraps begging at the table. I don't know, man. It's a rough one to look at, and I just see it everywhere happening. But the pace of it's quickening. That's maybe what I could say is the pace of it's quickening. So everybody out there, you better brace for crash position, because it is here, and it is truly here. So get ready. Ransom, back to you, man.
You know, all of that's not really surprising when you look at the future headlines. Like if you woke up this morning, you hadn't looked at news in several years, you would totally think that it was all fiction. Here's one. Oracle of Wall Street's 2008 financial crash says that sexless men living with their parents will cause housing prices to plunge 30%. But too bad families still can't afford the prices of the real estate at that cost. And then you got stuff like Biden. I mean, really think about the shutdown aspect of these headlines. So Joe Biden wants the government to install kill switches into your car, and we've heard that from other people. Germany announcing to ban private ownership of cars. Right there in Germany, where all the people are fleeing. I wonder
That's
why
only
they're
on
fleeing.
the weekend, my man. That's only, you can't drive on the weekend now. That's it. You just can't drive on the weekend.
Oh, so it's already done on the weekend, huh?
Yeah.
No, but anyway, think about that. What if you wanted to leave your country on the weekend in your own private personal car with all your belongings and precious metals? Guess you can't do that on the weekend. You better wait till Monday and hope things haven't changed for the worse. Here in the U.S., like I was saying, Whole Foods shopper in disbelief after claiming she paid $7 for an apple. I mean, maybe so. They're like $3 at the local convenience store right now. You can go get a banana for $3 or an apple for $3, but it is convenient. And then where I got this whole idea is this altmarket.us article about food is now an investment. Here's why inflation isn't going away anytime soon. And they get into that, all of these factors that are just going to increase inflation. And then if you thought, wait, that's no big deal, you know, I'm a country boy, I'll just go out and hunt me a couple deer. They are pushing that deer zombie propaganda. I don't know if it's propaganda, if, you know, there's really a thing out there, but what a futuristic headline. 2 hunters become first Americans to die from the zombie deer disease after eating infected venison. So, you know, like many others, and I'm sure you see the constant articles about E. coli poisoning in spinach or lettuce or whatever it is. I mean, it's just constantly. And then if you thought, you know, you might call because you got an intruder or, you know, there's squatters at your house or whatever. For the third time this year in 2024, widespread 9/11 outages, this time reported in 4 states. So if you lived in those states, I hope you can help yourself, right? Because nobody's coming to help you. And then you got meteorologists. This is a futuristic, title to an article, if I ever heard one. Meteorologist warns of weather wars between countries, citing, you know, the cloud seeding programs of DuByne and the UAE, and all of their crazy weather that they had. But I would bet money that exact situation happens on a cycle every so often. And they get dumped, you know, a year's worth of rain in one day, because it happens right here in the desert where I live every so often. It's called monsoon here. You know, if we were lucky enough to get it, we have a whole year of great growing and water. But if we don't get it, it's dry as a bone. Here's another one. This is the phone zombies. Americans check their phones 144 times a day. And when you get into this, they're not talking about checking on work or something like that. They're just checking if the world has, you know, been destroyed while they hadn't looked at their phone in a minute. More and more Americans are becoming Alice. I don't know what that exactly means, but they can't afford rent, groceries, and they're falling through the cracks in the country's safety nets, like welfare and different stuff like that. Most Alice's earn much of their or qualify for government assistance, but it's not enough to afford the help. So the help isn't much help. because of inflation and the skyrocketing cost of food. And then here in New Mexico, don't worry about, voting. You could just vote from anywhere forever. New Mexico voters can now sign up to do absentee ballots permanently. So, you could vote till you're 144. I mean, nobody's going to come check on you. You're just absent about that. And doctors on, alert as another mystery flu is starting to pop up, leaving people in critically ill condition. And there's no end to those that are, from the old vids to the new vids, they just keep giving us new things to worry about and put them in a position or more control. And everybody's rolling out facial recognition, the UK, like Germany, everywhere you go, they are keeping track of their own. And this is what's really bizarre and tells you that they're pulling the plug on it. It's because all of these new biometric programs, state-of-the-art surveillance, security, the countries with the biggest police budgets in the world can't seem to stop the crime or don't want to stop the crime, but they're more worried about what you're posting on social media. And guess what? They're not keeping track of the people that are newly arrived and, punishing them for things. No, only the old citizens. So that's a pattern that's in Europe right now and in the United States. And, speaking of that, a lot of people think, that could never get that bad in the United States where the police come to your house and investigate you or threaten you because of an opinion you had on the internet. But if you've been paying attention, there have been several people going viral because the FBI visited their homes because they posted about an opinion on one of these conflicts going on worldwide, proving to you that it's not much further to get to the point what they did to the Japanese American citizens in World War II, or any number of other countries once they turned partially or fully totalitarian, where they locked up a large portion of their citizenry for one, miscellaneous difference between citizens than the other. That could be anything from your status of your medications you were told to take, if you know what I mean, the intravenous medications you might be ordered to take in your totalitarian government where you live, or, saying the wrong thing on the internet. I mean, all of that stuff. They are setting it up where they're going to be there to micromanage you. And this shows you that they are pulling the plug on it. And you did say something that's really kind of puts it all in perspective. They're taking the third world and they're merging it with the first world and then flushing it. That's basically the plan. And those will be where all, if not most of the people of the world live, right? So they're all moving out of these areas that are now becomes less populated. And they're coming up here, making the cities here more populated, changing the demographics, the electoral votes, depending on what country you live in. You might have another system. But no matter what, the government is taking the interest of other people over you because they're about done pulling the revenue from you because there's no jobs. Jobs are becoming scarce. They have robotics and an influx of people to do any job at a lower wage that they want to. And then you see the prices of everything going in the other direction. And eventually you're going to come, like, here's a good sign of the economy, in my opinion. Last year we had 117% increase in corporate foreclosures. That means businesses that didn't pay their mortgages and lost the buildings or real estate that they were using to conduct business. And if that doesn't scare you, I don't know what will. I mean, obviously, if the bombs and pops all disappeared during the last wave, and if you get more of the smaller corporations that aren't the mega billion-dollar corporations disappear too, guess what? You get a situation where you're going to own your soul to the company store. And then, it's not that far-fetched to realize that these mega billionaire international companies might do deals with the countries they do business with to maybe censor you, not let you have certain products, or even, merge with the government into a straight-up communist system where you have to go to the, government to get your food or supplies. Obviously, that's not a system I want to live in. But you can see it's not far-fetched. And for all those people
Wait a second, Ransom.
Yeah.
That's You could just make a little rhyme. That $7 apple a day will keep the doctor away, so you can live to be 144, and you can vote once more.
Right. Yeah. Well, you can kind of see it going that way, and not that they haven't already tried it. Like I brought up that they did the Chicago is already trying to have pilot programs where the government runs the food stores, and they went out of business and closed up within weeks of starting it. If you actually thought government could do that, and I see these random headlines like Argentina wanting to join NATO. You can just see the little changes that are going on, and the incrementalism is becoming so fast that you're going to wake up in a new world, and that's exactly how they planned it. They have designed it like that. I don't know what people are going to do when they're the last remaining type of people in the country that still own their own property and grow their own food, because it's obvious eventually they'll be the last targets. They'll be the people that they say, look, it's their fault. They're over there not participating in the communal system, trying to, do their own thing. It's kind of like when the hurricanes come in and people buy up a bunch of waters and different stuff because they know that other people are going to want it. And then the government decided that, oh, no, you can't do that. You can't make a profit for foreseeing the future. Even though we will do it, we'll insider trade and we'll make profit from knowing the future. If you get caught doing that, we'll charge you with crimes. And I just realized lately that I guess New Mexico has become yet another state to make it illegal to use or save rainwater. So basically they're outlawing nature or your access to it. And that fits right into what we've been talking about, this whole Agenda 2030 program, where they're slowly trying to make it impossible for people that don't own property to even live in rural areas and, have the situation where they could grow these victory gardens without being pestered by government. If it's so unaffordable, they just squeeze everybody and have new reasons and regulations why you can't do this or that until everyone is forced to be on the digital soup kitchen. And then you will know that food was an investment when you had no choice but to go and deal with the people and go ahead and get your little mark on the forehead or wherever they stamp the barcode or the QR code so that you could get your rations.
Yeah, that they could plaster that right on their own sphincter, and you look at it that like you see the ploy coming. Another thing that seems to be just around the corner is they're going to keep raising everybody's insurance rates so high, so fast that if you can't pay insurance, you're going to lose your mortgage, right? So this is the next ploy. Get ready for this one. The food pricing is, I know apples as you buy 50 pounds of apples for like $30. That's what I know. Or even less, 50 pounds of apples for, 20 bucks if you get several. If you get, because we buy them by either the bushel or the half bushel, and it just depends. Is it really a bushel, or a lot of guys will sell it by 25, 30-pound bags. The old bushels of what you consider old, like, wicker basket, those things are long gone. The basket costs more than the apples now. So I'm looking at something that's like 25 cents a pound for apples, where this girl's paying $7. Like the awareness of just, and who's shopping at Whole Foods anyway? Like what kind of morons, if you are shopping at Whole Foods, I'm sorry, you're wasting your money. Like why would you go spend that much when you could go somewhere else and, get 5 times more for your money and not keep feeding the beast its money so it can enslave? Because I look at this and I shake my head, I look at these people like and it's a great thing like to buy the $7 apple and then, if she was a content creator and did that on purpose to try to show it was $7, cool. Hey man, great. That was a great use of your money to go viral and everything. But if you're just a moron out there buying a $7 apple just because, and then you complain about it, well, I guess you're at the bottom of the gene pool then, because survival of the fittest is going to knock you out super fast. The amount of money just to survive in New York City and then buy that kind of thing, sheesh. But the money is shifting. And Ransom, while you were talking here, I signed up for a couple newsletters where they're talking about resources and resource management and also resource development. I got the Guinea overview. Mature resources industry, West Africa's next major gold region, Guinea. So you can see how much money, and when you look at the amount of companies in here, so we got, now these are all major exploration companies. They're all involved in gold, iron ore, bauxite, and graphene. And we're talking like super multinationals like Rio Tinto and this kind of level of Nord Gold and this Siguri and Anglo Gold, Ashanti, SRG. These are some huge companies. And what are they doing? They're all setting up shop in Africa. They're moving everything over to Africa. Now, just like we did in the Western states here, we set up all these bauxite mines, and then we did all these iron ore foundries, and right around the Great Lakes was incredibly prosperous, incredibly prosperous. Some of the most wealthiest gold town, boom rush towns ever to emerge on our planet, all because of bauxite, iron ore right next to the Great Lakes. So this is a 2.0. They're going to develop these areas across Africa using the same exact 2.0 strategies of finding the minerals. You got to have the towns. These boom towns are going to pop up, but how long are they really viable for? Will it be a faster emergence and decline than it was for Detroit or Cleveland or some of these other, Green Bay? And look at Buffalo. I mean, they're still cities large, and they have their own thriving industries there too. A lot of it's restaurants and services. But I'm talking about rolling it back when the auto manufacturers were at the apex of the world. The steel mills were the number one on the planet and churning it out. When everybody was employed and there was so much money to go around, that neighborhoods just sprung up because there was that many people were coming into work. And America was at its apex in the 50s and 60s. That's the type of development that's slated for Africa. And you see the same companies over there doing that. They're going to build the company towns. They're going to build these massive, iron ore communities. They're going to build the bauxite, which is aluminum, for those of you who don't know. You can see it. And with Africa, like you said, being less populated, look how much larger Africa. It's deceiving to look on the map, by the way. Africa is much larger than the United States. I mean, much, much larger than the United States. The way that the maps are, Africa is completely distorted in size. It is a fraction of its real size comparatively to other continents. So if you're looking at what we could do just in the United States on how much wealth came out of just mineral extraction and how much that grew our society in America, and how it also pinged out to the rest of the world, where everybody wanted automobiles, they wanted American-made products, they wanted this, that, and the other. The exact same thing, but it can go way bigger, way harder, way longer in Africa. Way longer, because it's so much bigger. And these maps are deceiving. I don't know, Ransom, if you can find like a true size of the world map, because it will blow your mind how much larger Africa is really in continental size than it's depicted on the maps. And when you see so much of this moving over to the new grow zones are slated to be set up in the Sahel and North Africa's global centralized food production area. They want to move everybody into these 15-minute cities and rewild all of these farms and take all these farms offline and rewild them. But the plan is to take all that food production down into Africa, set out all the canals, set out all the roads, the rails, the ports, the processing facilities, etc., grow it all in one place, and then distribute it to the world through a network of the same multinational global players. But they're going to try to grow food in a single area in North Africa and the Sahel and parts of the Middle East, take all the rest of the world offline the best they can, and rewild the farms in Europe and the United States and move people out of those wild spaces into cities. And they're going to grow that food in Africa, and they're going to send it through their just-in-time shipping delivery routes to get it to the store for you. And this is the plan. Centralized global food production coming out of Africa. One place, one location, controlled by one global governance system and one global delivery system, overseen by that same global governance system, all run by central bank digital currencies issued from whatever central bank on high. And this is the world you're going to try to be playing in unless we disrupt that. I love the possibility of disruption into this plan. You see World War II, the Japanese prisoners of war, could have been Australians, could have been Americans, anywhere that they captured. They forced them to work in factories, but they did a lot of disruption in the factories. Like they'd send 2 left-wing engine parts when they were supposed to be a right-wing engine part and left-wing engine.
Just under 1,500 years ago, something terrifying happened to the world's climate, something nobody could understand. The sun began to go dark. Rain, the color of blood, poured from the skies. Clouds of fine dust enveloped the earth. Winter gripped the land for 2 years. Then came drought, famine, plague, and death. Whole cities were wiped out. Civilizations crumbled, and nobody knew what had happened. It was a catastrophe that affected millions and millions of people all around the world. But what was it? A catastrophic climatic event buried in the heart of the Dark Ages. This mid-6th century catastrophe was the most important date in the history of the past 2,000 years. This event created the world we live in today, something far removed from the minds of everyday peoples of our modern times. Unbeknownst to most, the catastrophe could at any time happen again. The volcanic winter was caused by at least 3 simultaneous eruptions of uncertain origin, with several possible locations proposed in various continents. There is even evidence of an extraterrestrial factor. A possible origin for this object could be the Taurid meteor stream. This stream is the result of the fragmentation of a much larger comet some 20,000 years ago. The Earth passes through the Taurid stream in November and June each year, resulting in regular meteor showers normally consisting of microscopic dust particles. A fragmentation of the stream is thought to have occurred around 500. It is possible that a fragment could then have collided with the Earth as it passed through the beta portion of the stream early in 536, causing the atmospheric dust veil event. The relevance is crop failures for several years in a row. While the dust veil was present, it may have caused widespread starvation, leading to an increased susceptibility to disease among the remaining population. Small comets had previously been thought to be less hazardous than small asteroids, but estimates show that a small comet fragment can have a global effect. In early AD 536, or possibly even late 535, an eruption or eruptions ejected massive amounts of sulfate aerosols into the atmosphere. The solar radiation reaching the Earth's surface reduced dramatically, and this rapidly cooled the atmosphere. Despite what the global warming nuts say, the sun seems to be the main driver of temperature and climate. The main historical aspect of the period around 536 may also be the most significant, especially to those descendants of the survivors. Who would be us today? This period coincides with a mass population decrease in Europe, in the Americas, the Middle East, and in Asia. In Europe, this is commonly known as the Justinian period, named after the Justinian plague, and is believed to be the first appearance of the Black Death in Europe. Meanwhile, in the Mayan Empire, things were looking bad. Researchers have realized that there is a 100-year gap in the civilization's productivity starting in 540, suggesting a dark age. The civilization experienced mass crop failure, which led to disease, starvation, and likely internal strife. People evacuated cities in and around present-day El Salvador. Cities that were left behind experienced a dark age, as evidenced by a gap in written records and a sudden decrease in construction in Maya city centers during the 6th century. In China, 536 was no better. Frost and snow in July and August that killed the seedling crop, causing a major famine the following autumn. Weather was so severe that 70 to 80% of the people starved to death. Procopius. The sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, during this whole year, and it seemed exceedingly like the sun in eclipse. The sun was dark, and its darkness lasted for 18 months. Each day it shone for about 4 hours, and still this light was only a feeble shadow. Michael the Syrian. If such an event happened today, and crops failed over a significant part of the globe for several consecutive years. Then once again, a large percentage of the world's population would face starvation. Thankfully, unlike the peoples of the worst year to be alive, we don't have to worry about not having food to last. We have my Patriot supply. And right now, you can save $200 on a 3-month food kit with ADAPT 2030. Adapt and stay prepared.
A market somewhere. So I'm looking at a map of 1648 because we were talking about the past before and how, Europe has changed so much, so greatly, so quickly, comparatively. Holy Roman Empire owned most of it, but how many of you talked about the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Crown of Bohemia? I mean, look at these two powerhouses in the 1648 and the Tsardom of Russia. That was pretty much all of Europe except for France and Spain. I mean, Portugal is a sliver over there. But think about these three behemoths at that time pretty much controlled everything. And then it switched over to Austro-Hungarian Empire to control the complete center of that, what was Bohemia, including Germany. And that was all absorbed into that empire. The Ottoman Empire in the south was fighting. And again, we get you go a bit further back in time you just had major players. That was it. Like 3 or 4 major players just trading a little bit of land. A lot of them had, Transylvania and Moldavia and Wallachia. They all had treaties. And then these are names that are in history that have been forgotten. But the empires, the Ottomans, they stayed. Russia's still here. It's just like everybody's flipping territory back and forth through the ages. Same rulers, same controllers of the planet. This time, our energy frequency is changing enough to I wouldn't say throw, but over-energize their ability to control humanity. Like the light frequency is increasing by the day as well. Changes in the sun, changes in our solar system, changes in the regional and spiral arm of our galaxy, the vibration frequency is changing. A lot of ancient cultures have mapped out the frequency change. But this is why they need, and what we're seeing today, to move to a faster system. And just a new news headline here, oil jumped 4.5% in just the last hour, based on the escalation here with, looks like Israel definitely hitting more targets inside Iran as we speak. So oil up 4.5% in the last 1 hour. I'm surprised they haven't suspended trading on that already, but we'll see by the morning how this one flares out here. This is a planned and scripted thing that we're looking at. Because and as well as I know, that this global economy needed to be shredded to bring in this central bank digital currency. Now, coming into a faster frequency, these global powers that want to try to maintain control cannot hold in the old frequency of like this Holy Roman Empire, where they would burn people at the stake and stuff. It just doesn't work anymore. They have to come to something faster. Well, gold and silver, then they went to the paper money because gold and silver was heavy and slow. We moved to paper money, and then we moved to credit cards and digits. And now, since the energy is moving faster, the frequency is moving faster, it's vibrating faster, they need to come to central bank digital currencies, which makes sense why everything's moving into this digital age and much faster with the fingerprints, the social scoring, all these things needs to go digital because it needs to be that much faster to track and trace. They're following the frequency of what our solar system and spiral arm of the galaxy are doing, unbeknownst to most people. But the speed at which this collapse is coming in on purpose, totally scripted. Now, where does it go from here? Okay, there's going to be a military response, and then there's going to be a hold off, it'll play out. Markets will crash, oil prices will rise, gold's going to rise, crypto will crash, whatever's going to happen. Then there'll be a breather. Things will semi-stabilize for another, day, 2 week, or whatever it is, and then there'll be another retaliatory strike, obviously by Iran into Israel this time. And it's going to go tit for tat like this until somebody like Turkey gets involved, or somebody gets shot down over, these Russian MiGs are up there and they're patrolling the skies up now over Iraq. Now, they forced one of our U.S. Stratotankers down during this last round, the first round of Iranian missiles going in. Apparently, Our straddle tanker was up there trying to provide support, and the Russian MiGs forced it down. It put up an emergency squawk and came down. Not fired down, but actually landed on its own, forced down by Russian fighters. They're up in the skies right now. So, it's just going to depend if somebody takes a missile or not. Because that's the escalation that the U.S. wants, or NATO wants, or the Western powers need to then ramp this up a little bit. Good for the war machine, bad for the people, because this is going to be it. When this continues to escalate, this will explain why all of the goods in the markets. I've done several videos on what was rationed in the war first. Rubber, so that people could only get one spare pair of tires per year. Shoes, they're rationed. You get 2 pairs of shoes per year. Sugar, coffee. These are the first things rationed right away. So then you can look at our world today. Oils, oils are rationed. I mean, olive oil, if you don't have your olive oil by now, and this kicks off, you're not going to have any more olive oil. And mainly it comes from Europe. And if it gets bogged down over here, they're definitely not going to be supplying you with olive oil out of Spain, Portugal, and Italy. So it's game on. And Ransom, I'll turn it over to you because I'm going to check the news here and see if I can't find something quickly. But I can't believe oil jumps that fast, and they're going to have to close the market today because it's not even open in the U.S. market. You all are closed over there, but it's still trading over in other parts of the world right now. So anyway, we'll see what happens here.
Right. You know what's really funny is I find it odd that it seems like in the last 30 minutes, either AI wrote a bunch of stuff in queue that are related to each other, or, like this was all writ this morning and everybody knew what was going on today, because just in, the last 30 minutes, all of the top headlines on like the Drudge Report have changed. It was all talking about Trump just 35 minutes ago, something like that. And now all of it, Iran strikes, barrage of missiles and drones. And then even this article, Pentagon speeding up work on its first new nuclear warhead in 40 years. Nuclear threats from China, Russia drive work for W-93 for submarine-launched missiles by 2030s. There's that date again. They love that date. But yes, supposedly oil prices have surged 3% in 30 minutes. Updated 30 minutes ago at 8:34 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So that'd be like 10 o'clock on the East Coast. From that time to right now, oil supposedly have surged 3%. So this might be an indicator. If you're up listening late at night, over at least in the United States, you might want to go fill up your cars with gas, because obviously they'll be changing the numbers on the signs in the next week. And this is exactly what we're talking about. This is a small instance, but what we were talking about earlier, when globalization meets localization, and you can see how what's going on in the Middle East will affect your corner store within the next 2 days. I mean, because it's directly related, and they make sure that we're so entwined in other nations' business that this happens. This is another reason. Look, last time we were on, we were talking about, remember, Biden hadn't filled up the national oil reserve back, right? He said he was going to fill it back up. They used it, they sold it, didn't fill it back up, and then right on cue, we're going to have some Middle East stuff, and we're, who knows how far that'll go, or if they're going to work this out and postpone it. But eventually, this is what we're going to be dealing with: is high prices for every single thing that makes life go on. And right now, you can get online, and there's a bunch of millennials, Zers, or I don't know if they call them Zoomers or whatever, Generation Z, that are now realizing that it takes them 3 or 4 jobs just to rent a place, feed themselves, and exist. And the reason that is because, all of these places have, 1, cut back on the jobs, and 2, made sure that the hours that people work at each individual job or shift never amount to 40 hours a week. And that way they don't have to pay benefits. They don't have to take care of your health care. They don't have to take care of anything like that. You were talking about insurance rates skyrocketing. It's going to inevitably keep doing that. And to the point where Only the richest of richest people can simultaneously feed themselves, pay all their taxes, pay for utilities, pay for gasoline, have transportation, whether it's a private car or they rented it, whatever it is, and then also pay for things like dental and healthcare. Um, but the average citizen is not going to have that. And then you might ask yourself, well, if that's happening, why are we influxing tens of millions of people per country across the northern hemisphere? What is it about the northern hemisphere that they seem like they're pulling the plug on? Because, not to get conspiratorial, but you have people like, these billionaires, the social media moguls, super rich entertainers, engineers, royalty, all of these different people that are making bunkers, but are they making them in the northern hemisphere? No, they're not. They're finding either places that are real remote out in the Pacific Islands, or they're building it in the southern hemisphere in places like New Zealand, Australia, Argentina, the list goes on, but they're not building them in the north. And think about this. I get kind of like really conspiratorial when we talk about these things, because I know that in the near future, at some point, water is going to be as precious as gold. Not in the way like Water World or like these other things. I mean, sorry, Mad Max or anything where there's no water and the planet's desert. No, it'll be access to the water, and who owns the rights to the water, and who owns the rights to the water also has a big hand in the distribution of products that come from that water, which is not only drinking water, obviously, but all the water to feed the fields of the new places that they would be growing. And, why is it that they are all buying places in the southern hemisphere? Well, it's because if they have a nuclear exchange in the northern hemisphere and take out a bunch of cities, it's okay, because they were planning on getting rid of a certain number of people anyway. And none of that radioactive fallout will cross over the equator and affect the southern hemisphere in a substantial way. And if they use things that don't have a 50,000 year shelf life on it, use more traditional type nuclear weapons, they can have basically that disappear in a decade. And we kind of seen things like this. They try to scare the wits out of people when we have like an oil spill or something. But if you remember that oil spill in the Gulf, the last one we had, a hurricane blew through, and that stuff, it was just gone. The earth absorbed it. And the fact that I know that they've blown up or imploded or exploded, however that works, I'm kind of being goofy, but all of these tested bombs that they've put off, the mother of all bombs, the father of all bombs, all of these giant ones in Russia, and the United States has done all of these ones in Nevada, in the earth, on the earth, in the atmosphere. And I would probably think that they've probably toyed around with nukes in space. They just didn't tell us about it. But what it tells me is that you could have an exchange with thousands or hundreds. You wouldn't even have to have thousands, just, maybe dozens even of warheads that go off at strategic locations to totally end this empire the way you know it, the world that we know it. And that would be the ultimate reset. It would scare everyone. They would be able to lock down everyone. They would be able to track everyone under terrorist laws. They would be able to seclude large areas for growing and animals, setback for animals, saying that, you can't go in there. Or like that science fiction movie, Oblivion, just, convince the public that certain areas of the planet are off limits and no-go zones because of radioactive fallout. But those places wouldn't be in the southern hemisphere where they're building all their super armored bunkers. Or maybe it's something natural that they know is going to happen. I mean, I just played that commercial about the worst year to be alive, and they talk about all of these volcanoes that we have indication went off in El Salvador, Mexico, maybe even in Southeast Asia, and then several all over the place, Iceland. All of these volcanoes are going off, but it's at the same time that we were going through a meteor stream, and they believe part of that may have broke off and contributed to the darkness. But whatever combination of things happened, a lot of people died. A lot of people starved because they couldn't have food production. And what do you think would happen with a couple dozen nuclear warheads in exchange that, um, might mess with the weather? And then you have finally, after years and years of conspiracy theorists saying that there were weather weapons and different things, and us pointing out that there's been treaties since the 60s that countries wouldn't wage weather wars on each other, but they never said anything about doing it to themselves. Now we have headlines that are literally talking about, are countries going to use weather modification to harm each other? Is that not the ultimate convincing to the populace that there's man-made global climate change? If you use these tiny, tiny examples of weather modification that probably, are only changing the output of the rain that was going to be by like 1% or something like that. This is the same thing that they did on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, but it's a little more technologically advanced than then. But these programs will start increasing. And, I saw all those pictures of places that are usually just basalt deserts growing greenery on it. And if you can grow greenery on it, it means you can grow food on it. And if you can grow food on it, that means you can have livestock. And if you can have livestock, you can become an economic powerhouse, especially if you're one of those traditional old world empires that just so happen to own rare earth metals or oil reserves or any of that, or the main thing, potable water, massive amounts of potable water. And if you remember, the Bushes and some other people bought up a bunch of the water rights for Argentina. Now, I know that a lot of people have been paying attention to Argentina for a long time. They used to be rich. Then they went kind of communist. They went poor. They're having kind of a new reset right now, wanting to join NATO. I mean, who knows how some of these bizarre things are going? But what is clear is that it's all on cue. All of these war articles seem to be already written, ready to go. And let's even throw in one about how the U.S. is frantically trying to update their nuclear arsenal, because the fact remains that as public knowledge goes, Russia has better nukes than we do. They have the nukes that are hypersonic. They have the ones that break into multiple nukes when they get here. And we've had people in our government admit that, even though we have programs like particle weapons and things like that to possibly shoot down individual nukes, they can't stop something that turns into 15 or 20 other objects and all lands into a city area. So the proposition that the nuts at the top are really going to nuke the entire face of the earth into where it's a nuclear wasteland is pretty preposterous. But what I would imagine that they might do is select a few key areas where they have just recently increased the population by millions of people. Say they took out Detroit, Phoenix, Chicago, over here in the United States, Boston, and New York. Now, those are all places with a lot of people, and the death toll would be so big that the world would really, stop in their tracks. But how much of the continental United States would actually be destroyed with that? Not much, actually, not much. There would be massive amounts of areas that were fine. And, speaking of the size of the maps, I went to that website, what's it called here? The True Size or whatever of the map. And, think about this overpopulation myth as well. This shows that Africa could fit India, China, and the United States all comfortably in there, with probably 30 or 40 other small countries fit into the areas that it didn't cover. But that really isn't nothing. People forget that Russia extends from Finland and Belarus and Ukraine all the way over to Alaska. This is the biggest country in the world. It has all of the pine forests that put out like 70% of the oxygen on the planet. A lot of people don't know that, but yes, there's this massive pine forest that goes from one end to the other and wraps around into Canada of pine forest. And that's where really all of the oxygen comes from. I know a lot of people think it's the rainforest, and the actual, value of the rainforest was all of the biodiversity and possibility of finding compounds to help humans. But we knew that wasn't going to happen unless the pharmaceutical companies were in control of that in the first place. But think about this. Russia really only has a few big cities, and it's over towards Europe. So what's going on in the rest of that giant, tundra and forest? Well, there's almost no people, and you could also fit Africa into Russia. People forget that. You could just put Africa and probably the United States and maybe most of China there in Russia. They have lots of land, lots of resources. And for some reason, it's never been cut up by any other empires. Notice that throughout time. That main chunk of Earth, the biggest that there is, has never really been fought over and never really been exploited. But I would bet money Russia has put bunkers and all kinds of continuity programs all through that, all kinds of missiles we don't know about, programs we don't know about. So the idea that we would just go and do a complete nuclear annihilation is kind of preposterous. What is, to me, reasonable is that they would pick a lot of targets, probably in the US and in Europe, maybe even some in China, because China would be okay with letting a few million people go. And think about it. These are all countries that have no problem with millions of people dying in war. You take the United States, we killed like 1.9 million people there in the last Iraq war. You could, take your pick out of Mao or Hitler or Stalin or Lenin or any of these people in these areas that didn't have a problem whacking millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions altogether people, that they wouldn't go ahead and have a plan where they restructure the whole world and have everyone convinced that it was just the way things were. It was prophecy. If you're one of the religious people, if you're more of the scientific mind, you just thought it was inevitable that the doomsday clock would hit and that the world would go to nuclear war. But what if it was only, like I said, just a dozen or so? That would be enough to scare everyone in the world, reduce the population by hundreds of millions. And these people down here at the bottom of the map, down in Papua New Guinea and all of Tasmania, all of these places randomly out there, they're not going to be affected by that at all. But guess what? Their families will still have land holdings and gold for the decades that follow the devastation when they, enact their reset. So I don't know if nuclear annihilation is something that they have in the cards, but the idea of it and a couple of testing, demonstrations again, might be something that all they need to put the world in the order that they want it in. And that's a completely subjugated population worldwide that is completely tracked and traced, even their animals, everything, how much food they buy, what they're really thinking. And, they've spent decades and decades making these social engineering programs. And I'll close with this. Here's an idea that people have thought I was, kind of kidding about for years. The fact that they have machines that can read your mind. They have machines, and I've been talking about this for a long time, but people are now coming to the realization that these systems have been increasing their ability over the decades since I read about it first, right? So they've been increasing in the ability that they can do. So the world doesn't realize the kind of technology they actually have. They have technology that can literally read your mind. So if you thought you were going to do some kind of revolution or insurgency in this new reset of a world, you might be mistaken because you're being micromanaged all the way down to that degree. And the only way to not do that is not take part. And somehow, I don't know, I'm not calling for a war or nothing, but there might have to be an internal war in each and every nation in order to take back the reins of humanity and civilization going forward. Hello. Are you there, sir?
Yeah, thanks for letting me know. I didn't. I'm wondering how many spots are living in that ancient forest that stretches for thousands of miles in the directions across what we know as Russia today. And these are primordial forests with some of the most ancient creatures. There's probably things up there we haven't even discovered in science yet. That's how vast these areas are. And then, parts of the maps that are looking at that haven't changed. You got to think about the countries that really haven't changed too much, their border areas. Okay, so Russia would be one of those things, or, the former Soviet Union, which expanded out. But that main hub, if you will, or that main core area, you're right, it's never really changed. And think about the wildlife and the, like I say, these different types of mammal species that are there, hominid species. But then look at Turkey and Persia, otherwise known as Iran. I mean, you go back in time, thousands of years, these borders remain pretty much the same. So is it just by quirky happenstance that the same players that haven't changed over the millennia on the maps are still the same players that are agitating and causing global conflict today? Are they going to split further the smaller remnants of what was left of the last world? Because I encourage you to go back. I'm looking at this Persia-Turkey map from 1890, and it's pretty much the same borders as today. But, you know, after 2 global wars and, you know, several regional wars that broke up, like I said, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, you start to look at these, you know, it's just, even India's map had changed greatly. You know, they did have Pakistan-India borders different, you know, so, I mean, India's changed quite a bit. But these more ancient of the nations remain untouched in their border areas and land control areas. They might have accrued some, but they sure aren't losing it. Kazakhstan's another one, you know, crossroads there in the Silk Road. It's been retained its own same landmass forever, bounded by the rivers and the mountain ranges and the deserts. So who's really playing who here? I think this is more of a scripted thing, and it is about the depopulation. Now, we could talk in one way. Put yourself as a global governance system here for a minute. Coming into a time now where the sun's magnetic fields are changing to the point where it's disrupting food growing regions on the planet and the amount of food that we can grow and the rain cycles mixing. Now, we could talk geoengineering all you want, or is that the excuse for the change in the hydrological cycle? Or is it jet streams bending because of new magnetic fields and perturbances on the sun? It was expected that the sun was going to change and jet streams and cloud cells. Then we got all these massive rainouts, rivers from the sky, and they just can conveniently blame it on technology. Oh, it's a weather war. Oh, it says, will they truly come clean and say, by the way, it's the magnetic fields on the sun. Yeah, we're back at a 400-year cycle that disrupted food production globally last time, and the carrying capacity dropped 25%. So, scratch my head. Is it a global war that'll wipe out 25% of the people to match the carrying capacity of what we can grow globally? Or is the excuse going to be given that the global war has disrupted agricultural production because the machinery is there, the repair parts aren't there, the seed stock's not there, the factories aren't there? Or was it all in turn that, well, those food growing areas, 45 north and 45 south and below, weren't growing very much anyway, and the rest of our growing areas were getting too saturated or too dry to really have massive food production, and everything is shrunken year upon year, and the wars now in some of the bread baskets, like Ukraine, for example, have shrunken global food stocks even further. You know, which is first here, chicken or the egg on this one? Because there's a lot of repeating fingerprints in history overlapping right this second. And if global governments know that we weren't going to be able to grow enough food to continue, and knowing that food is the number one thing that's required for a civilization to continue to have extra calories to solve problems and have strong workers to then go out and do these tasks, if you're not going to have that, if you're not going to have abundant extra food and abundant extra calories, then your society would collapse anyway. And what if you knew the timing event where the calories would shrink, food production would shrink, and it's only a matter of math until you figure out where that rollover point is. Now, would you allow it to go to that complete rollover point just naturally, organically? Or would you preemptively take control of that before you hit the rollover point so you can maintain control of the economy and the citizens? Because everything I'm seeing that's been put in place here for the last, say, 20 years, I'd say 10 solidly that. the digital grid, the digital money, the control of, they want to know where every citizen is. They want to know what everybody's thinking. They want to know where everybody's doing. Is it all because they really want that much control, or why? That the question should be asked, why do they want so much more control? And you can say, well, they want to enslave humanity. Okay, great, I get it. But why? The why for me would be global food shortages, and they want to know where people are. They want to know how they're going to act. They want to know how they're going to behave. They want to know which governments are going to get toppled. They want to know which economies are going to live, survive, thrive, or crash based on the citizens in there by following their social media, by following who they're connecting with, by knowing their norms, their patterns, their behaviors. Because with all the AI out there now, I could almost predict for you which countries are going to survive through, which areas and pockets are going to be the resistance movements, which areas and pockets are going to be self-sufficient. I'll let them go. They're going to be self-sufficient until later when we need to put them back in and split up the empire once again. It's all about these food shortages are already baked into the equation. Just like they say, hey, the war cycle on Bitcoin's already baked in. They're watching the second precipitous drop in Bitcoin occurring in real time right now, all based on this retaliatory strike. Oh, by the way, more information coming in. Iran just put up a no-fly zone. Now, there have been a large amount of American aircraft straying in there from Iraq. If they are in that no-fly zone, they are fair game to be targeted, to be shot down. Now, will America intrude on purpose to put the fighters in harm's way and allow them to be shot down to escalate the war? Not sure. But I know now Russian MiGs are patrolling Syrian airspace. I don't know if they're going to throw up a no-fly zone either, controlled by Russia, but something seems to be taking place. Thirdly, a lot of these explosions that you're hearing across Iran were interceptors, and there were no ground strikes. But again, it's propaganda war. Was it? Was it not? So anyway, Iran said they intercepted above ground, and there were no ground strikes for all this. So this is all happening in real time here as we're on the show. So again, will the borders be redrawn? I highly doubt it. Iran's going to grab more territory. You look back at the ancient players, and what would have gone on? You got to think about the time. I want to take it back to the Roman era again. So if we're talking about these 400-year cycles in the sun, these grand solar minimums, so we'll roll back into the 1600s, 1640s, and we go back, every 400 years from there, and you go, say, 1220 to 1240, and you go back, and eventually you come back to the birth of Christ era. So between then and 400 AD, when was really the Roman Empire was in collapse. And they give us this story that it was debased currency. It was a debasing of the currency. You had foreign soldiers working in the Roman military. And Rome's going out all over the place to find all these extra resources. Okay, you can see a direct fingerprint of they tried to deal with the problem the exact same way. So knowing that a lot of Roman, let's say, power bases have restructured themselves here in America, if they're following the old ways, they would solve this problem or perceived problem the same way. The system only seems to last 400 years before it's reset. I'm saying nature. Others would say bad economic management, military management, war after war. Bring me back to these history books here since the 1600s. I go through very little of the book before it finds another war scene or another war painting. So our maximum duration of time, and I've done this before with the Chinese dynasties. So the maximum time of a Chinese dynasty in all of the 3,000 years of history. Now, if you go back prior to the Warring States, the Three Kingdoms period, that's still what they were just constantly fighting for resources. So every Chinese dynasty, the longest it's ever lasted is no longer than 400 years, which really made me get into this whole 400-year period of cyclicity of this grand solar minimum. And then if we go back to European history, it starts to match up. And if we take it back to the Roman era and we can go back to the Greek era, they experienced the same thing 400 BC. And it sees the same fingerprint occurs again and again. So we are absolutely at the apex of the allowable range of what nature deals us with food growing. Now, whether we have the technology to do it on a better scale today, we've reached and expanded to maximum carrying capacity.
It's no different than a bunch of moths living in an area or a bunch of caterpillars that are now springing out of their cocoons, and the butterflies are laying eggs because it's been prolific rainfall and there's more of this type of mugwort that's growing in the field than normal, and 10 times the normal amount. So you're going to get 10 times the amount of butterflies, 10 times the amount of caterpillars. The carrying capacity allows for that. But as soon as things return to normal and the rainfall pattern stabilizes and there's 9 times less mugwort plants for next year, the butterfly population is going to shrink 90%. It doesn't matter if you have better technology, you can grow more food in more northerly areas, you can get the green revolution going. It just doesn't matter. That's about the carrying capacity of what the world will naturally let us grow food, because we can grow food indoors, but it's expensive and it requires electricity. The carrying capacity of the planet is what it is with the technology of the day. It's not about we have better technology. It's about the carrying capacity with the technology we have has reached its apex. Damn, the Romans were cited like time and time again. They had compressed air energy technologies. At that time, they were like levels above what the Greeks were. They were levels above what the Sumerians were, according to traditional history. But you got to think about, at the time of whatever empire was around, they were at the apex of their technology and the full expanded as far as they could expand. That's how they were able to grow to such ginormous, powerhouses of economy. We're at it again. We're just looking at contraction of food supply around the world naturally, and governments are going to adjust to it. Now, they're never going to tell you that because you would get angry because they didn't give you time to prepare. But anyway, we're witnessing it now that it's on the fast track. So this is the way I'm recollecting it, that we are definitely coming to massive food shortages, lickety split here. Like, we're going to see huge declines in global production of food that they're going to blame on the war. But it would have been a natural destruction of the food supply, because the bands of moisture, cloud cells, and temperature bands are shifting enough to now dent our global food production. But they will never tell you. They're going to blame it on the war, when all in all, it was all just a natural cycle. So we're coming to a steep decline in food production. So they're going to use the war to depopulate and match that carrying capacity right now. So something significant this way comes. And I'm done. Mic drop.
Yeah, it's looking like, and I was going to tell you, you were kind of breaking up there. So I thought you said you had maybe access to different routers. But I got this, I was using this map of the true size of things, and I realized, it's a great map to interact, to show people what's going on everywhere. So I kind of lit up most of the countries that are having war or planning on war. And you see this dispute with Taiwan, and you see that it is that tiny little island off the east coast of China. But then
Jinmen Island.
Oh, Jinmen. Okay. This whole area, though, when you zoom in here, it's really weird because you can see the old empire. And what's going on right now is the introduction of the old player of the Ottoman Empire. Obviously, it's not long until Turkey, Iraq and Iran are already involved in this. We already have troops in Syria. It won't be long until Jordan has no choice but to be involved in it, since they're surrounded and all the missiles are going overhead between Israel and Iran. They're going back and forth. But there's something right here in this strip of the cradle of civilization, or at least one of the cradles of civilization, that the New World Order, if you want to call it that, or the world order or world governance, whatever name you want to give it, they really have a hard-on for this area. And like you said, this has been fought over so far back into antiquity, everything around this Black Sea. And that's kind of what you see right here. And we know that this shatter belt between Chechnya and all the way down to Turkey, in every world war that we've had, which is 2, or all the major wars in there, this has been the shatter belt. So when you see this area that still I haven't lit up start to take sides, which most of them are now either trying to be NATO on this side. So you can probably add France and Belgium and all of these other countries that are part of NATO into this map that I got here. But you can see the three empires or three wars that will merge into one. You have the one here in Eurasia between Ukraine and Russia, backed up by the other parts of Europe. And then over here on the other side, you got the United States and China, both of them being about the same size. And you could just map out, if I had a marker, I could write the lines that's going on. So you got fentanyl and agents pouring over here into Central America, coming into the United States. And then over in Europe, all of North Africa is moving into Europe. And then they're talking about going to war. Well, you know what they need for that war? If they do have a major war, they need people. They need lots and lots of people. And those countries are the countries that are infertile. They're not reproducing. Like you can pick Italy, Germany, Poland. All of these countries are having infertility problems. They're not creating enough offspring. So somebody had the bright idea to, let's just collapse it all. We'll bring everybody in. That'll be, millions of men that are no longer in the country they're from, which, by the way, looks like the exploitation zone down there where all the countries are coming from. And then you have millions of people that either are going to be deported or they're going to be conscripted into this war that will end up right here in this shatter belt between Chechnya and Turkey when it spills over from Ukraine into Romania and Bulgaria, and all of the countries. You have the other little ones that we've had problems in the past, Croatia, Slovenia. And like you said, that's the old Austrian-Hungarian Empire right here. Most of Ukraine used to be part of Poland. You see all of these countries right here were all part of this centralized Germanic state. And then they sided with the Ottoman Empire here. And it's just all lining up, like you said, almost like a duplicate of World War II. Now, the nation states have renamed themselves. And, we call it NATO. And then the other ones will be the BRICS nations, you can just see it all folding out there. So obviously this Israel conflict is going to lead to a Islamic super state that will be right here in the Middle East. And then let's talk about all of these countries where people are fleeing right here. If it's possible, like it looks like in places like United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia and other places, that the weather patterns might be changing into a new cycle, it's very possible that it would only take 1 to 10 years for this whole area from Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, all to sprout up as grassland and, stuff that could support new economies. And what would you have up here in, southern Russia, and especially if it gets cold, right? If it starts to get more of a cold trend, you'd see all of these nations that are about to go to war that are dying population-wise already, dying as far as freedom-wise. They're losing to totalitarian ideas. And it is very bizarre that this supposed former communist nation that is now embracing capitalism and telling its citizens to reproduce and stop eating the GMO and stop drinking so much and don't take the foreign intravenous vaccines on every scheduled program that they come up with. They are now the target of this, NATO alliance, who each individual country has gone to the totalitarian side of socialism and communism, all the way to the point that just your opinion, they're knocking on the doors at night to find out why you posted this, that, and the other thing. And the same trend is following in this formerly free United States of America. We have the FBI going around questioning people about their thoughts and stuff, making, accusations from the government level that patriotic citizens are somehow the national threat, and especially if they're from one demographic or another. And that seems to be the same demographic that's getting targeted in Europe as well. I don't know why. It's like you said, it's back and forth with these factions. It's the same factions over time. And that's exactly what we're seeing. We're just seeing another war based on ancient bloodlines being played out here. But this time, I think it's different. Like I said, I think they have a unified technocratic elite at the top of this that has certain goals planned out. And those goals are the not only the redistribution of wealth, freedom, but actual populations and nation states. So I'm expecting to see like more stuff. Like I've been hearing a lot of millionaires moving down to Costa Rica, El Salvador, even though we hear about El Salvador as being the place where all of these MS-13 gangbangers and people crossing the southern border, you know, and that's the side we hear about it. We don't hear about the billionaires going down there buying up big swaths of land using cryptocurrency to get things. And those kind of countries are popping up all over the world. And like you said, it's like everything is being flipped on its head so that no one understands what's going on. And only the top percent of people are going to realize where to realign their assets so that their families and their legacies make it through this reset.
Yeah, the top elitist families in their rituals, delving into the other side through the multi-layered picture frame, what we call reality. So, are we moving from inflation to hyperinflation? Because that's the next play here, is to strip the wealth out of the world. They've done a good job so far with regular, what we call inflation. Unemployment, globalization, moving stable jobs to other places. But the next play is hyperinflation. And if anybody of you saw last week when I was talking with Mike Adams, we talked about that. Instance after instance, we sit where we do today before our money hyperinflates. Now, if it's going to follow anything in history, our prices should double within the next 12 months. And after they double, they're going to go up 3 to 5 times in just a matter of months after that. There'll be a lot of intervention. People will be angry. The government's going to have to step in. They're going to try to do all these emergency rate cuts and do all these things, but it won't work. And then within a few months after the emergency measures that calm people down from storming the castles, it's going to run away to 10x. And then quickly thereafter goes to 100 times. So, within a couple of years, the loaf of bread you buy for $1 could easily cost you $100 in today's money. Hyperinflation is the last trump card that they throw out to extract all of the wealth out of the world before and during the collapse. Hyperinflation is not by accident. It is on purpose to extract wealth. So if we look at the Austro-Hungarian Empire again, which I'll bring you back to, we look at the hyperinflation that occurred in Austria. We look at the hyperinflation that occurred in Hungary. By the way, everybody's really familiar with the Weimar Republic. But that pales in comparison to what happened in Hungary. The prices were doubling every 8 hours. Hungary has the largest and the widest and the most hyperinflation, where the money moved into the quintillions of dollars at the end of the thing. So 1,000 billions is a trillion, but 1,000 trillions is a quintillion. And their largest banknote finally ran up to something like $400 quintillion. The numbers are just so staggering, it's hard to even fathom how many zeros that is beyond there. So it's kind of quirky that you had this old empire that controlled the main brunt of what you think all of Europe is, all the way to Russian border, all the way down to the Adriatic Sea, way down into Croatia of today, way down into Moldova or past that, in every way, shape, and form, even included parts of Germany, Austria, Switzerland, who remain neutral, this little dot within that. But hyperinflation occurred as the breakup of the empire occurred. It occurred in Austria and also Hungary at the end of World War II. So we're seeing this double pincer move on hyperinflation within one of the greatest empires that extracted most of the wealth out and broke it into these smaller little fragmentary pieces. And what we left with today is controllable nations. But the point was hyperinflation. So what's going to happen in the United States? The plan was to balkanize or break up the United States anyway into smaller regions, more controllable regions. This was already the plan. The only way that could be accomplished is to put America into hyperinflation so it breaks up on purpose. It's planned. So I would encourage everybody out there to do these. Just go to Wikipedia, which is not my favorite anyway, very controlled site, but look up the hyperinflationary episodes in history, and you would be shocked how many there are. The only fiat currencies that have not hyperinflated away are the ones we're using today that will hyperinflate away. Just as the old adage go, if you're a motorcycle rider, you either have been down or you will go down in an accident. The same thing with fiat currencies. The only ones that exist today are the ones that have not hyperinflated away, but will. Every single one prior to the ones being used today have hit hyperinflation and collapsed. It's not a time of if, it's when. And it seems like when is the now time. Because Bill Holter's newest interview, if you're looking at it, he's calling for higher gold and silver prices and higher interest rates at the same time. And if that continues, the super highest interest rates we ever experienced in America was like 17%, 18%. We're going to eclipse that. So, I don't know, Ransom. I'm going to just leave it there. Big money's buying gold because they're looking for protection. Big money's buying land because they're looking for resources. And it looks like we're going to start to hyperinflate. So, think about what a few ounces of gold or silver could do to protect you. You could pay off your house with an ounce or two of silver. In a hyperinflationary event, we're going into hundreds of thousands, millions per dollar. I mean, sheesh. You can start buying land with an ounce of silver. So I'm going to leave it there. I'll let you wrap it up, man. I see it on the wall. We're at the cusp right now.
Right, with them buying up all the gold. You notice that I was wondering, actually, if you looked back when they confiscated precious metals last time, was there a period in which a lot of people were selling it where they kind of made the market where everybody would want to sell it, basically getting people to voluntarily sell it to get money before they decided that they were going to start taking? And I was also wondering, when you were talking about China and its silver, when I hear that, I think technology, I think smart bombs. Is that what's going on also? They need more bombs, they need more smart bombs, and really the only way to get that is to have precious metals. And to do that, you would have to kind of fleece the public of what they got. So obviously, if you're holding on to some and you can keep it, it's going to be valuable throughout your lifetime, your children's lifetime, their children's lifetime. And a lot of people I see in the comments, they say you can't eat gold. That's true, but there's never, not once been a time in history where you couldn't use gold to buy food. Never. I mean, unless silver. And think about that. They can't, and I think that there's a big fast one getting pulled too. And if you look around the world at the countries that are about to go to war, at least the ones that are allied to the United States, we sold them these junk F-35 fighter jets, right? And it's well known within the U.S. military that they're junk. They're nothing compared to the FY-22 that is kind of where they stole the design from. They just kind of took out all the best parts of it, slimmed it down, made it cheaper, and started selling it all to our allies. And 30% of them don't even work right now. They have problems with their software. Most of the chips in it are Chinese. So whatever kind of warfare that we're about to see is very strange, how it might not turn out the way you think it would with the forces that are available. I keep thinking about the guy, Joel Scalzon, and the whole idea that he had about China and the United States going to war, but then both countries breaking out their next level technology right afterwards. And if you think about what you've talked about several times is the new debt cycle. In order to have a new debt cycle, you're going to have to destroy everything old, like the Cultural Revolution, and give people something new technologies, new robots, new interfaces, AI, all of these things like the mind reading technology I was just talking about. But also, you can sell them a whole new world of debt. to take part in anti-gravitic technologies. And I'm sure if you've been paying attention, you have the South Korean scientists saying that they now have duplicated and triplet and quadruple and proven that they can have superconductors at room temperature semiconductors, which means that they're opening the world up to the technologies that already exist and they've been holding back. But they're not going to pull these things out until they're done flushing everything down the toilet, because you have to have a new system to replace the old system. So I think, unfortunately, our people our age are going to get to see the destruction phase, our children and grandchildren, the reset phase, and it wouldn't be till the great-grandchildren, if they're the same species still, that are going to get to see this new technocratic nightmare that they're building for everyone. But it does seem like it's going in that direction as we speak.
And you got to check out the new Boston Dynamics robots with 360-degree joints using electromagnets for their ball joints that can move 360 degrees. Downright scary to watch this thing. It's like the most agile acrobat you've ever seen in your life, made of metal. See you next week. Bye for now. DuByne, Ransom Godwin signing off.
Thank you for listening to Revolution.